Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today to our network detection and response webinar. It's a deep dive and demo into a new solution that we think you'd be very interested in. Today, I'm Tom Ruffalo. I'm president of eSecurity Solutions. I'm a CISA, and I will be covering the introduction to the topic of NDR and other solutions that do detection and response, comparing it to protection solutions. And Bill Monroe, VP level from WatchGuard, will be talking about the new WatchGuard product that they recently purchased from a company that was already in that industry, and he'll talk to you about what their product does, an overview of the industry, and actually take a deep dive into the topic itself. I want to talk about some really important things related to detect and respond. And first of all, why is it necessary? Secondly, I want to differentiate protect solutions from detect and respond, since those are they're specifically called out in security regulations. They serve different purposes, and we need to talk about that. Talk a little bit about detect and respond alternatives and differentiate between them, and then talk a little bit about which solutions you might want to consider owning. WatchGuard will then, I will turn it over to WatchGuard after that. So I'm going to spend like 5 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to WatchGuard will talk about NDR, their solution, do a deep dive. First thing I'd like to talk about is talk about protect, detect, and respond, and it's a fundamental component in cybersecurity regulation. Detect and respond is part of all major regulations and frameworks. The list of security controls needed to satisfy each category's requirements grows each year as threats continue to evolve and evade other security. Security controls are defined in three major categories: access control and identity management, protection, and prevention, which has been predominantly what's been used in the past, and then detect and respond and recover solutions. And we're going to focus today on that third piece. Regulations require detect and response solutions because protect and prevention solutions by themselves aren't sufficient. Attacks still happen. And strong security starts with a third-party risk assessment to help you define your specific needs and prioritize your security gaps. Stronger security should be the number one reason for adding detect and response solutions, even though compliance and regulation is expecting you to have those solutions as part of the regulation framework. Companies that are serious about security know that they need a balanced approach to security. Breach analysis shows that attacks are often inside networks for months because they evade protect level security. So an appropriate security plan should include security analysis or gap analysis of your company to determine where your gaps are. Secondly, provide balanced security utilizing appropriate assessments and gap prioritization, both protect and detect type solutions, and your company's ability to respond. Include a security roadmap as a guide, which is a natural fallout of doing a risk assessment, so that you've defined a plan for how you're going to get from where you are now to where you need to go and to actually effectively achieve your maturity goals. Let's start with the basis for discussion by defining protect, detect, and respond separately. Protect security are built around the concept of blocking and preventing attacks, which works fine until criminals regularly found ways to circumvent those prevention solutions. Security holes get closed, but then another loophole gets open. And defending as many protection points as possible is the goal, but many of the solutions actually protect individual components, as you can see here, right? So the goal is to protect everything, but we have endpoint security, firewall, mail. They're all really protecting different points of entry or different places where the attacks can reside. Detect and response security in some way monitors your security infrastructure or assets to detect indications of attack or indications of compromise. Ideally, detect for security will monitor all your security, utilizing all the information that it's received from security and IT logs and information, and then validate the alert information as valid or change the alert rules to avoid getting false alerts. Once threats are detected, as an automated way of as automated a way as possible, a response is needed. And that response comes from attacks need to be blocked and stopped, that the attack chain needs to be analyzed, and conclusions need to be drawn. Now, note that detection and response solutions are use different methods to detect attacks. Let's go to the next piece of this here, right? So we've got basically detect solutions monitor all these different areas, and depending upon what type of solution, if it's a SIEM, you're monitoring and detecting everything and trying to provide detection for the entire system, which is really the ultimate goal. But you also have solutions for like EDR, which is endpoint detection respond, and NDR, network detection respond, that look at different components of your infrastructure and attempt to find attacks and threats. Cloud monitoring can be something used in, say, Amazon Web Services or something like that. The response goals varies by, always the response is to try to block it, and to determine what you need to do to remediate that. But if you look at, again, SIEM, EDR, NDR, they all have different places where they do their detection, and they should not really be confused with each other because they are not the same. An NDR is not the same as a SIEM. None of these replaces the others in terms of what they do. They all attempt to do detect and respond based on where they're living and what they're looking at, when that's a real big difference. So if you look at these individually, SIEMs monitor all key assets, including security controls and key IT, like servers and networks and user behavior. So that's really big picture stuff. SIEMs provide a complete picture, correlating all the data and the rules, and use AI-based threat detection. Is really the only threat detection that collects and looks at a broad set of threat data and can collect the data from everywhere. NDR, which is what we're talking about here today, has a very similar objective, but it is looking at the network to detect attacks and threats. And basically right now, for most people, most companies, that's being ignored, right? So they have EDR technology in there, probably you've upgraded from endpoint to EDR. And so you're looking at what's going on in the endpoint. But without looking at multiple locations and detecting threats, you're going to have an incomplete picture. So NDR actually fills a very necessary void in the information that we can look at in order to detect threats. So when trying to determine which detect and response solution to own, here's a guideline. For solutions we define here, SIEM, EDR, and NDR, the solutions are not redundant, as I said before. We classify companies in three categories. There's compliance-driven companies that are either regulated or their customers are regulated and they're being forced to be compliant, or maybe you're very focused on cyber insurance, in which case you also are trying to upgrade your security over time. Then there's the best practice focused companies, people that want strong security, but there's no real goal other than best practices. And then there's companies that are more ad hoc and evolving the security over time. Those are the ones at the bottom there. So our recommendations are for companies that are compliant or need to be compliant. We really recommend all three types of solutions. And that could be something you do over time as part of your roadmap, but you shouldn't assume that buying one or the other is going to solve your problem. It will not give you a complete or anywhere near complete detect and respond capabilities. Companies with strong best practice sort of goals, we would say the same thing is true, but maybe you have a little bit longer roadmap to get there. Again, it depends on your budget. And then companies that really are ad hoc, again, it just depends on how serious you are. But ideally, all three of these things should be acquired by companies, and over time, it can be something that you add to your security. Now, what eSecurity Solutions does, this is just one slide on us. We provide complete security solutions to our customers, including GRC services such as security audits and readiness assessments and certifications, best practices, gap analysis, and security assessments and testing like pen testing, and as well as security products from leading vendors such as WatchGuard and other companies. And then we also provide managed security, but not managed IT. So we provide managed security, which includes managed SOC, managed SIEM, managed firewalls, endpoint, and so forth. So that's how we work with our customers to meet their customers meet the customer's needs, and we tailor our solutions for every individual customer. So at that point, now I'd like to transition to Bill and let him talk about NDR.
First, welcome everyone. Thank you, Tom, for having me today. Really appreciate it being here. What I'm going to do is take what Tom talked about and dig down a layer and give some examples of it. So it really comes home. And then I'm going to introduce you to what network detection and response is, what the WatchGuard version of that product is, and we will do a quick demo. And if we have time, we'll even look at a customer case study. But as Tom talked about, one of the things that's not happening in a lot of organizations is companies are focused on authentication. They're focused on those endpoint detections, and they're not looking at the network when you think of the threat surfaces out there. And here are two examples, and these are just recent examples in the last few years. Circle CI was hit back in 2022. The attack came in through an endpoint of a remote worker. That attack was able to compromise a session cookie and gave the attacker access to that organization's internal network. The company wasn't monitoring their network. The attacker spent 3-4 weeks in that network, and really their intent was to move through that network and attack Circle CI's customers. Circle CI is a software AI integration company, and so customers like Instacart and Stripe and Lyft, if you hit them with a ransomware attack, you're going to make a whole lot more money, and that's exactly what happened. In this case, one of the partners who had very good security, one of the customers, I should say, who had very good security, noticed the attack coming in via Circle CI's interconnections on January 4th, and that's when the remediation efforts began. The problem here is that in those 4 weeks of time, the dwell time, as we call it, Circle CI had no idea that attack was operating in their system, and that attack was reaching out to Circle CI's customers up their supply chain and attacking those organizations with 3 or 4 very successful attacks. On the right side is a different type of attack. It's a vulnerability attack. So as we're going to talk about in a moment, there's a variety of types of attacks out there that can penetrate the defensive environments you have. And this is another example. A vulnerability through Progress Software's Move IT allowed this attacker to walk right through Bourne, Ontario, Canada. Bourne is a data healthcare management environment for millions of people up in Canada. They walked right through their defensive systems, right into their back end, moved all of that data out of their environment, and even used the vulnerability in the Move IT secure file transfer to actually pull all the data out and make it really easy. And this was a huge problem up in Canada back in 2023, and it caused a lot of problems and a lot of attacks on people's personal environments because they had so much data in the Bourne databases. Neither of these companies were looking at their networks. And so when you think about your network, why is it vulnerable? What are the risks you have out there? Well, if you think about the network that you're operating, oftentimes there's unknown devices on that network, or there's vulnerabilities on devices on that network that you're not aware are there. There's data located in locations that's very sensitive that you may not be aware of. And we now see a growth in IoT devices. Many times IT is unaware those devices are deployed and they have vulnerabilities in them and they're connected to the network. So all of these types of vulnerabilities live in your network. And with firewalls alone, it's very hard to find those risks and mitigate them. There's also the attacks we talked about, like vulnerability attacks, attacks that bypass those defenses, get into the network, and now move around to find the data that they want to exploit, whether it's steal or ransomware attack. And so having the ability to see attack that's bypassed defenses unfolding is really important. One of the big problems everyone faces, and this is something that Tom's team really supports with, is limited staff and limited expertise. There just isn't a lot of trained, good cybersecurity people who can actually go in and forensically find attacks, find them while they're happening, and actually mitigate them. So why is NDR so critical in this story? Let's take what Tom talked about and let's go a layer deeper. NDR is going to watch all of your network flows, your east-west flows, which are all of the internal traffic in your network. and the north-south flows, which are the flows that go from inside to outside your network across your DMZ environment. And it watches it 24/7. It's the eyes on the traffic that a human being can't deliver. It gives you visibility to all of the devices operating on that network. It allows you to go through and take a look at all those devices, to identify them, to say how important they are. It alerts you to when there are rogue devices and shadow IT environments and shadow IoT devices. It also watches for the attacks that are out there. So when an attacker attacks your environment, they need your network to be successful. If they do a ransomware attack and they get to 2 of your endpoints, they're not going to really get a lot enough data to make it worthwhile paying. Or if they're trying to get to you through your network to get to a partner, they've got to get into that network. So in either way, into the network doing the reconnaissance, the command and control, the lateral movement, the data staging, the data exfiltration, they need your network for that. And what's important here is that network traffic is really verbose. There's a lot of it, and it's very difficult for humans to monitor. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But AI loves network traffic. And when those attackers are in there looking for and unfolding that attack in your environment and looking for the critical data, they're going to be noisy, really noisy versus what normal is in your network. And that's why AI and NDR together become a very powerful solution. The other piece that's important is NDR is a passive technology. It's not interacting with the data. It's not interacting with your operating systems. It's not firing off executables in your endpoints. And therefore, the attackers can't see it. And if they can't see it, they can't turn it off. They can't bypass it. So that means it's a wonderful source of truth. So let's go a layer deeper. Let's talk about that security operations center that Tom was discussing. In a perfect world, what we're trying to do in a security operations center is look at the threat surfaces on the left and cover them, the network, the endpoints and devices, the cloud platforms, the users that are out there, the identities, the AD directories, and cover them and pull in data into your SIEM and correlate what threat attacks are happening in those areas in the SIEM, figure out what's important, and then respond to it, maybe through a security orchestration and response tool, a ticketing tool. Some of those are built into the SIEM, some of them are separate. Regardless, be able to take the response and go back to where the attack is coming in, the endpoint, the network, the cloud, and take that remediation action. This is the goal of what we're trying to create. Broad visibility to attacks, especially attacks that we can catch underway, correlate how that attack is moving in a central intelligence area, and then mitigate that attack the best way and the fastest way in the best location. The problem is the reality doesn't always work out that way. Through any one of the different threat surfaces, no matter how good our defenses are, there's going to be a way around. Whether it's a phishing attack that a user falls for, or it's a vulnerability that no one has a defense for, or it's some level of passwords that aren't very sophisticated and therefore they can attack them and get through. And what's going to happen is when all of that data comes into the SIEM and you have a lot of information coming from the endpoints, let's say you're collecting network traffic from your firewalls and your netflows, that's a very verbose data set. And then you've got your cloud data coming in, and then you've got your identity data coming in. What often happens is the actual attack gets hidden in the data. And it's very difficult for the SIEM analyzer, the person working there looking at the glass, to find the actual attack. They're adding AI and correlation to do that, but it's still really difficult. And what happens? Well, the dwell times get long and the attacks are in and operating, remediation possibilities are missed, and attacks are successful. And we see this in the headline every day, just like Circle CI and just like Born. So how does network detection play into that? So let me introduce you to the Threatsync plus NDR product. First of all, this is a cloud-native product. If you're familiar with legacy NDR tools, they require on-premise hardware. This is a new generation of NDR that works from the cloud, and I'll show you how it collects data in a moment. This includes a very advanced AI engine, and I'm going to dig into that in some detail in its own slide. And it looks across your entire network. Think of it as being able to look at all your firework and router traffic in a single screen of glass. For the network, it becomes a unified risk visibility and threat visibility tool. And then it includes the ability to automate and remediate these attacks. And we'll talk about it in a little bit. It also really supports with compliance for all of the network controls in the standards out there, like NIST 853, NIST 171, ISO 27001, and UK Cyber Essentials, which is 4 of the most common standards that are out there. So now let's look at our SOC environment, but let's add Threatsync plus NDR. Now, let me point out here, Threatsync plus NDR does not require a SOC environment. You can operate it all alone, and we have many customers that do very successfully to cover all of the network. But let's look at it in an entire security operations center environment just to show how the value actually grows in both environments. The first is that the Threatsync product is going to be able to take in a lot of your data from the cloud and the network traffic. Matter of fact, all of your data. And it's going to be able to correlate that and find your threats. That's your most verbose, noisy data. It's the hardest data for human beings to actually understand. But what Threatsync plus NDR is going to do is it's going to learn that traffic and it's going to understand what's normal. And we'll talk about that in a moment. It's also going to be able to do a layer of correlation at the device and the identity level. You'll see that in the demo. What does this do for us? Greatly reduces the data we're throwing into our SIEM, makes that data much more intelligent, and it's operating as a backup to detect compromised devices, compromised endpoints, compromised identities, because it's going to see the attack unfolding after that compromise and be able to correlate it back. Now it's going to come into your SIEM with much more intelligent data. Your SIEM operators are going to look at that data, be able to very quickly understand what's an attack and what's not, and go through those remediation steps, removing the dwell time, improving the processes. So whether you operate an NDR tool as a single point solution separate from your identity and your endpoint, and just cover that, it's going to cover the threats in that network. And if you operate it in your total SOC, it's going to help support the total SOC environment to operate more efficiently, as well as covering those network attacks. Ultimately, it's going to reduce alert overload. It's going to cover more of your threat surfaces more effectively. It's going to reduce your dwell time. It's a second line of defense for your endpoint and your identity. And it's going to see attacks that are unfolding inside your network. That's really what we're talking about here with NDR. So what does it look like? I'm going to introduce you to 2 products. The first product is WatchGuard's Threatsync plus NDR that is available today. And this product operates in the WatchGuard cloud with Threatsync plus NDR in the center operating as a primary risk and threat detection tool, and then WatchGuard's Threatsync operating as the remediation tool. It's going to pull in the logs from all of your WatchGuard firewall products, Firebox products, but it can also pull in other firewall data, the NetFlow, the syslog, the DHCP, from all of the leading firewalls that are out there. So it's an open platform. It's going to also collect data from the different routers and switches that you have in your network to be able to look inside that environment. It does that through an agent collector that you can configure and pull that data up into the environment. And then, of course, if you have WatchGuard's EPDR or EDR solution, it's going to pull that data in also. In a future release, we will add other EDR tools. It's going to correlate that data. It's going to look for the real attacks that are occurring in that environment. And then it's going to send you alerts around incidents. We call them smart alerts. I'll show you one. It's going to give you the tools you need to visualize that attack and do a correlation, and then work with Threatsync to do remediation. It also comes with a really powerful reporting package, which I'll go into. The second product I want to introduce you to is a cloud expansion of Threatsync plus NDI, We're going to call it ThreatSync plus SaaS, software as a service. It's going to come out in Q4. This is an exciting add-on because now it's going to bring in your cloud platforms like Azure, but it's also going to bring in your SaaS applications like Google Workspaces and Microsoft Office 365. So now, all of a sudden, when an attack is unfolding, let me give you a scenario. Let's say it's a brute force password attack on a weak Microsoft password that allows the user to get into the Microsoft Azure cloud. They want to go from that cloud down into the network environment of this organization. You're going to see the attack unfold within the ThreatSync product and correlate the brute force password attack with the movement of data from that Azure environment into the local network. And then you're going to see the expansion in the network through reconnaissance and lateral movement. So it's a very rich experience of when attacks are occurring from the cloud to the network or in the cloud alone. Another possibility there is someone attacking your Box or Microsoft data environments where you suddenly have a lot of very sensitive customer data because that's where, say, your support group has got their data. Now you're going to be able to see attacks in that environment. Another advantage is you're going to be able to work with multiple cloud environments and still have a unified security interface. So these are the two solutions. ThreatSync plus NDR, which is covering your internal network today, including your perimeter and including your work from home and your VPN. And then ThreatSync plus SaaS, which is coming in Q4. It's going to be November timeframe, which will expand this product out to cover your cloud environments also. Really powerful solution. Let's talk about the AI that drives it. So we hear a lot about AI today. There's actually a lot of different types of artificial intelligence, which most of you are probably very aware of. The AI that seems to be so exciting today is generative AI. We're not talking about that here. What we're actually talking about here is unsupervised and semi-supervised machine learning working inside of a neural network. Those are the technical AI terms that are working in this environment. And what it's doing, it's using little under 70 machine learning models, statistical analysis models that first go in and create what's a normal world look like within your network. You think to yourself, well, what's that mean? It actually means that for every device, for every second of every day, there's a normal standard in 67 different views that it looks at. When one of those is variably out of that standard, it's going to say, whoa, that's a little different. Huh. I wonder what that means. Let's see if anything else is out of standard. And it's going to correlate the things that are different. And it's going to ultimately surface the ones that are attacked because the models are built to specifically search out the techniques and processes that attackers use. If you go over and look at the far right, here's a 30,000 user organization. They have over 6,000 internal devices, 5,000 internal IPs. This is 1 week of data for them about a year ago today. 40 million network flows of data operating in that environment. When that traffic is collected, it's enriched, and it's feature engineered down to what's normal, it becomes 1.3 million events. And when those are correlated to behaviors, it becomes 367 behaviors. When you look at those behaviors and you look at what's anomalous and what matches those TTPs, those techniques for attacks, they saw 35 alerts over that week or 5 alerts per day. Now that's something even a small security team can deal with. And that's what the power of the artificial intelligence does. So let me stop sharing here and let me walk you into the product. And I'm going to spend a few minutes in there. This is a live demo. Here it is. It's operating in a browser. And let me see, it's coming up there now, which everyone should be able to see this. So here is what within the WatchGuard cloud, ThreatSync plus NDR looks like. This is demo data. So we generated this data so that it would populate the user interface and give you some different stories. And so what you can see here is in this demo data, over a week of time, we've got 2.24 terabytes of traffic running. There's 33,000 devices. That's a lot of devices. There's 893 policy alerts. We have all of them running and we made them very noisy. You won't see this in real life. Matter of fact, that company sees about 6 policy alerts every 30 days. But we made it because we wanted to show different scenarios. 4 smart alerts. So a policy alert's interesting. Policy alert is generated from the controls that come within the product when you roll it out. We talked about the different compliance standards that are out there. In the US, the most common compliance standard of controls that operates things like FFIEC or NCUA, CMMC, is the NIST 853 framework. It's a huge framework set of controls. We took the network and cloud controls that are in the NIST 853 and we built them into the product. So there's a control environment underneath this product. You can go in and build controls. Tom's team can go in and build controls, modify controls, etc. So it gives you a lot of variability. Controls are great because they find risky things. I'm going to give you examples. Smart alerts are different. We're going to start here. Smart alerts are things the AI finds. So what is the AI found in this data set? Well, it's found some tunneling activity related to a database server. It's found some probing and reconnaissance activity coming off an endpoint device from a user. It's found some suspicious, say that twice, activity and port scanning on a high-speed printer, an IoT device. Let's take a look at that. We can dig in and we can start to see what's behind the alert and what we want to do about it. In this case, we can see that a variety of stuff has happened over this device. We can get specific information around when it's happening, what it is, where it is, and what this is a printer that happens to be in the HR office because this user identified it and tagged it, and what types of threats are occurring in this device. And we can dig down even further and we can see information related to timelines, for example, and behavior counts over time to see how the AI picked this up. And so all of this data is here to allow you to then go back in and very quickly remediate this device within Threatsync. You can also go in, comment on this, and tune this environment. We want back up to our dashboard again here. The other piece I want to show you is devices. So remember I told you you have a view of all the devices in your network and which ones are acting risky and which ones are not. And so here you can start to get an overview of what are the different types of information that you're seeing, where are those things located within your environment, what's blacklisted, what's blocked, etc. We can also go in and look at each one of these devices and we can understand the device type, what the AI tells you the device is and how it should be protected. We can also go in and map our subnets and understand what environments are operating within our entire network. So very powerful visibility, allowing you to go in and see what's happening and where it's happening. Now let's take a final look at policies and then we'll jump back to the slides. So in this case, we've got a whole bunch of policies that are built into the environment. One set of policies that everyone gets are about 56 different ransomware prevention policies that CISA, the U.S. Central Agency, Security Agency, recommends. And it's going to do things like say, hey, you've got unsecured internal telnet traffic going outside the organization. Were you aware of this? Here's where it's happening from. Here's what's happening. And you should probably go in and take a look and do something about it. So policies are great for that type of environment. But policies are also great. Let's see if they still have this one in here. If you want to look at, they keep changing my policy controls. You can see RDP from external to internal. That's another common attack vector. Here's a very common attack vector. If your Active Directory is talking to external sources, you're being attacked. That should never be happening. You can go in and identify that directory, identify what's happening at that directory, and understand how to block it and stop that from happening. There's another policy alert that I don't see it in here now. We built a policy alert that specifically looked for the Move IT vulnerability because it has very peculiar actions in the network. And so you can take vulnerabilities. Let's say you go through and you do your patch management, but you're still concerned because, hey, there may be something out there you don't know about. So you can very quickly write a policy control to look for the techniques of that vulnerability, and it will show up here. And you can say, ooh, I've got a system that had that Move IT software on it I wasn't aware of, and now I need to go patch it because it's showing that it's being attacked. And so it gives you that sort of visibility. So I'm going to stop the product demo and I want to walk through another type of demo that we have, or another type of product that we have in here, and that is reports. So the product also comes with a series of very powerful built-in reports. And on the right is the ransomware report. I showed you those ransomware policies. This report combines all of those ransomware controls and shows you as a company how you're doing at defending your ransomware, how risky it is, how under threat you are. You also get an overview network threat report that gives you visibility into all of the different areas going on in your network, from detection summaries to device visibility to policy effectiveness, right down to each of the controls that you have activated. So these are two types of powerful reports you get out of the box. So now the set of controls, though. As I said, we built in the ISO and the NIST 181 controls. And if you add on WatchGuard compliance reporting, which is an add-on module to the Threatsync plus NDR, you now have access to all of these reports. So if you're an organization that is concerned about being compliant with different type of regulations, this will allow you to show a auditor that you have these controls in place. These controls are operating and effective. It's basically an automated assessment of those controls. And if a control is ineffective, how you are mitigating that control to bring it in line. And like I said, within the product, we have NIST 853, ISO 27001, UK Cyber Essentials, and you can configure any control the way you want. So what use cases? What does this do for us? Why do I care? What do I want this thing in? That's a lot of neat features. Well, here are the things it does for you. On the risk visibility side, the idea of hardening your environment, improving your threat hygiene. It's going to allow you to go through and identify all of those devices. It's going to be able to go through and tag them and tell you when a device is acting risky. It's going to allow you to overwatch where your very sensitive data is. If you're using a zero trust environment, you can actually build policy in the product to watch it, to make sure that no traffic in there, access points, things like that, are acting out of normal from your zero trust. It's also going to allow you to go in and find blind spots and vulnerabilities you may not be aware of. For example, if a port isn't properly secured, if a firewall rule has become ineffective because of changes to the infrastructure without that rule being updated, if a IoT device is on the network and you're not aware of it and it needs to be patched, if your backups get shut off, we monitor backup systems. We see that collection as network traffic. You can identify that in the environment. We'll even point it out to you. And then if it suddenly shuts off, we can alert you on it. So a notion of mitigating risk and hardening your network. The next set of use cases around the threat detection we talked about. When attacks come through that get past your perimeter defenses, it's going to pick those attacks up inside the network. It's going to find them and allow you to mitigate them and reduce that dwell time and reduce the damage that that attack's going to do. Then, as I talked about, it's going to support with compliance reporting, whether it's GDPR, ISO, or NIST, or whether you're just trying to build a series of SLA and program success metrics. These reports become very powerful. Of course, it's going to support you in the supply chain world. What I mean by that is if your internal network is really hardened down and your hygiene is really solid, when attackers do come into your environment to get through your back end to your partners, you're going to detect them. But you're also going to have the ability to show your partners you're doing that level of protection with the reporting that's in the product. We have a customer, it's a small dairy co-op in the north of the UK. They serve a very large grocer across the UK and the US. They have to provide that report every month, show their level of security to keep that contract because that large grocer has a top-notch cybersecurity environment. Everything on their supply chain is digital, and they know that it's a very big attack point. Third-party risk for them is really strong. This client, who otherwise is much smaller than most of theirs, can show them this report, show them their hardened environment, and they continue to do business with a much larger vendor making money. So when you think about your cybersecurity, don't just think about it in terms of defense and risk. Think about it in terms of enabling your supply chain ecosystems, enabling your partners, protecting your customers. And then finally, cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is getting harder to get, yet everyone really needs to have it. It's getting harder to prove and keep your minimums down to prove you have good hygiene. And it's really hard if the worst happens to get a payout because they're always going to look for some breach of your contract. We actually have cyber insurance controls and reports built right into the product to help you with all of the network and cloud section of your cyber insurance so that you can prove to them, I've got good hygiene, I want insurance, or I want to keep my costs down. And if attack does occur, hey guys, my backups were running. Hey guys, my single sign-on was working, my MFA was working, my network was secure. This was a vulnerability attack nobody knew about, and we were able to mitigate it faster than everyone else. We want to pay out. Let me walk through this quickly. Walters Surface Technology is a firm of 789 employees, 57,000 devices. They run about 1.13 terabytes of weekly network traffic. They have 6 subsidiaries in 7 countries. They manufacture all sorts of cutting tools that you and I can buy, but mostly they sell in the business-to-business environment. The problem was with the multiple locations. They couldn't get a unified view of their network. They had to comply with Canadian regulatory and privacy requirements, and their plants were actually in different countries, which made collecting the data in their SIEM and having visibility really difficult. They also didn't have a lot of budget or staff. What they loved about the WatchGuard NDR product, it deployed from the cloud, meaning they didn't have to ship hardware and rack and stack in 7 countries and 6 locations. It just made it much faster and much easier to roll out. The simplicity, you saw the UI and the automation in the tool made it easy for a small team. And the simple truth is that the Threatsync plus NDR product is budgeted costs when you deploy it about half or a little less than half of what any other legacy NDR tool is going to look like. So it's just a much better return on your investment and a lower TCO. For them, the outcome was very strong. They took a lot of time to map their network out, tag all of their assets, and now they continuously monitor it, especially their focus on intellectual property and innovation. And they have that built in a zero trust environment. And the NDR tool is an overwatch tool to make sure all of those controls are working. To date, they've been very successful in mitigating their risk, and they've been very successful with Canadian GDPR compliance. They've been up and running for 2 years now. So let me close out with some of the differentiators. So this product is built to be operated by small teams. It's built to be operated by companies like Tom that are managed security services providers because there's no hardware, because there's a nice, unified, simple way to see all of these threat surfaces. The AI is as good as any AI out there for threat detection and response. It's award-winning. It was built by DARPA. We've modified it and rebuilt it in the last year to really pick up cloud and network detection. You saw the numbers and info on that. Product is very automated. It's very simplified. The reporting is included. So it really gives you a powerful total cost of ownership over time. It does not go up, it goes down. The one thing I wanted to put out there was that we are going to be through eSecurity Solutions. WatchGuard is going to be offering a very special promotion. If you purchase Threatsync plus NDR, we're going to come up with a discount. I won't say that it's going to be north of 40%, but it is for buying SaaS in the fall. So let me make that clear to everyone. If you roll out ThreatSync plus NDR between now and November, you can purchase the additional ThreatSync plus SaaS for almost 50% off on the product. So watch for that offer. It's going to come out as a written offer in September. And it's a great reason to get started on this today to get that network protected. And the other thing I want to point out is rolling this out is actually very simple. If you are already using Firebox and WatchGuard Cloud, you literally click a button and it just starts working. When you do the rollout, all of those control environments start working immediately, and the AI will, in about 14 days, stabilize out and start also giving you results from the AI side of the house. And so with that, I'm going to take a look and see what kind of questions we have. Let's start at the bottom and work up. Does WatchGuard NDR support compliance reporting? Yes. So WatchGuard NDR will support, you have to buy the compliance reporting add-on for GDPR, HIPAA, and PCI DSS. And those network controls are in there. Now, let me be really clear on this. For something like PCI DSS, many of those controls are actually on endpoint and in network. And so it's a limited value. But for HIPAA and GDPR, there's 40, 50 different network controls that are covered. And so it will support on that. And Tom's team can work with you on making sure that those controls are right for your environment. What are the strategies for false positives? Great. So the issue with a false positive is a false positive says something is bad and you need to go take care of it. And then you go look at it and it's not bad, right? And it's very common in environments where you're just using controls, where it says, hey, if I see an IP address that I've never seen before coming internal to my network, I want to be alerted because that could be an attack. And 90% of the time, that's going to be a false positive. What you do in something like WatchGuard is you minimize false positives in two ways. The first way is when you look at that data, the control doesn't actually say that. What the control says is there a new IP talking internal? And is it talking to something that's highly sensitive? And is there a third activity going on like reconnaissance or command and control involved in it? And if you see all three of them, the risk score is high enough, we'll kick off an alert. The better way it mitigates false positives is the AI is built in and does that automatically. So what the AI is doing is it's actually correlating all of the different anomalies it sees. So it's not alerting at any one single thing. It's looking and building a case that says, hey, this is very likely a ransomware attack, pop an alert. Hey, this endpoint is absolutely compromised by the communications it's doing on the network to 4 servers in AD directory, 3 servers of which it's never talked to before, activate an alert. So that's how we're dealing with false positives. You're not getting a single alerts here. You're getting an intelligent correlation of what's happening in that environment. WatchGuard NDR, network latency and bandwidth. We are not tapping inline in the network. And I'll answer the next question that comes with that right afterwards. What we are doing is we are pulling live NetFlow and DHCP traffic and running it through an AI machine very quickly. Is there time latency? 5 minutes, maybe 8 minutes is usually what we see, sometimes 15 minutes. If you've got a really slow network, that's about it. Now, the next smart person is going to say, well, wait, if you're not tapping the network traffic and pulling it off, network traffic's encrypted, how are you doing anything with it? Great question. The AI is what's making up the difference. So if you think about what you decrypt in network traffic, you're looking at the body of that traffic. But a lot of the AI doesn't care about what's in the actual file. This is not a DLP tool. What we care about is how anomalous is this traffic? Is the IP it's going through anomalous? Is the country the IP is in anomalous? Is the data coming from a server that never talks to the outside? Is that anomalous? Is the user that's made the request operating normally, or is that endpoint anomalous? Does the AD directory related to the access, related to the movement of that data, normal, or is it anomalous? And so what we're doing is we're using AI to eliminate the need to crack open all of the data and look at it. Can you collect it with our stuff? Absolutely. If you want to hold on to that data, it's very expensive. Can you go in and look at it forensically after the fact Absolutely. We have a lot of customers that do that. But for our threat detection, we are not actually cracking open the data and decrypting it. We're not in line. That keeps the speed up. And we have been up against the dark traces of the world, the vector AIs of the world, and we rate at 97, 98% of their detection. So you're losing the slowness and the overhead and the cost, and you're gaining 97, 98% of the detection capability. That's why this is game changing. What third-party tools and platforms does WatchGuard NDR support? So right now, out of the box, we support all the different types of firewalls and routers that are out there with the Dells, the Fortinets, the Ciscos, et cetera. As far as SIEMs, we can output this data into any SIEM. We have an API outbound call that's modified specifically for SIEM ingest. We can also push it directly out into a SOAR or a ServiceNow threat or a ServiceNow ticketing tool, et cetera. How does WatchGuard NDR ensure redundancy and high availability in case of a network failure or disaster recovery? So this is a great question too, because in the world of legacy NDR, the network failure was your network failing, right? Because you were doing everything on premise. Ours is in the WatchGuard cloud that has a very powerful redundancy model built behind it and operates a much larger environment than just the Threatsync NDR, if you're familiar with it. If your network goes down, we can still collect data from any of the endpoints and devices that are operating, and our network's not going to go down because the WatchGuard cloud has that sort of triple redundancy backup that we built in multiple countries. And I can get you details on that, but it is significantly large. Does WatchGuard provide RESTful APIs with interfaces with other tools, homegrown tools? Not yet. SciGlass, the product this is ported from, does, and that port is going to occur next year. So the answer is yes on the roadmap.
Interested in purchasing, how should you, who should you contact? You can, if you have a sales rep here already, contact them. If you don't, you can send, we will follow up with you, or you can send a query to sales@esecuritysolutions.com, or frankly, you can send it to me. I'm going to put my contact information. Actually, I don't have it there, but T Ruffolo, TRUFFOLO @esecuritysolutions.com. But we will certainly follow up with people. There are multiple ways that you will be able to acquire this. One of them is have a discussion with our tech advisor, make sure we know exactly what you're looking for, give you a quote, you purchase it. The other one would be, it is possible to do an evaluation in your environment. So that is another alternatives. We also just can talk about what your needs are and discuss whether this is a good fit for you. There are questions also about NDR. Is NDR have incremental value over EDR? And I would add to that, does SIEM have incremental value over NDR and EDR? And the answer to that is all of that is true, which was the whole purpose of my original presentation at the beginning, was that these are totally different things. They look at different, if you think about it, they're looking at different things in order to detect threats, right? So if the NDR is looking at network traffic to detect anything it possibly can that looks like it's not, quote, normal, and anomalous sort of traffic. And then that says, okay, this may be an issue. If you look at a SIEM is collecting data from everything that is plugged into it, which is like your security, your servers, and user behavior, and it's trying to make decisions, and it's got an AI engine. So from that point of view, it's sort of the big daddy. EDR is looking at your endpoints only, and so it can only see what's on the endpoint. So if you think about it logically, does NDR have detect things that EDR won't? It certainly should and would, because it's looking at it's looking at the byproduct of what's going on in the endpoints, right? It's looking at all the traffic that's being generated, and if there's traffic being generated from something that the endpoint is not detecting, clearly it's going to find something that an endpoint's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me add real quick, because there's a great question on it, which is, you put all this security in, someone asks, you put all this security in, and then there's a human failing and they fall for a phishing attack. You're absolutely right. That just wiped out all of your EDR security when they fall for that phishing attack. But when that attacker now owns that endpoint, and now that attacker says, okay, I want to go in and I want to find their Active Directory, and I want to find their Active Directory because this endpoint that I'm in doesn't have access to very many things that are going to make this, say, ransomware attack worthwhile. And when the endpoint starts talking to the Active Directory, and it says, "Hey, I want to access this user's data," we're going to pick that up. Hey, I want to talk to this AD directory, and then I want to access this server. And this user and that endpoint have never talked to that server before, or they've done it 3 times in 4 years. It's going to pick that up. And so what it's going to do is it's going to see that internal network traffic, and it's going to see the attacker acting different than what's normal and pick it up and say, whoa, there's 4 things that just happened in a row. And remember on the demo, I showed you that correlation timing chart. It's going to show you those 4 things. You're going to be able to look at it and say, an endpoint with a user on it who's not an AD manager, and yet the AD system's trying to create an administrator. And now that endpoint is trying to talk to a server it's never talked to, and oh, wait a minute, and now it's moving a whole bunch of data off that server into a DMC server. Whoa, I'm being attacked, right? It's going to give you that level of visibility.
Well, I was going to say a couple other things. Somebody asked, is there an on-prem versus a cloud? Yeah, I think Bill highlighted that there's protection for on-prem in infrastructures as well as the cloud infrastructure. So you've got 2 different areas that can be protected. They're two different solutions. They work together, but they're 2 different solutions. So you can protect the cloud environment as well as the on-prem.
Yeah, and to be very clear about it, we're not putting any hardware on-prem. We're pulling the net flow and the DHCP and some of the other traffic data off your firewalls, off of your routers, off of your switches. And then in the cloud environment, we're actually making API calls to pull the logs out of your Azure. We pull the log out of your Active Directory. So we're not taking any of your actual traffic. We're taking the metadata of your traffic and the descriptive data of your traffic. And we're not taking any of your user data. We're taking the logs of your user data that's in Active Directory. And we're not taking any of your actual, IP or information. We're taking the descriptive metadata and the log data from your cloud environments. And that's what we're bringing in and correlating within the AI engine and within the control environments. So we don't actually ever touch any of your intellectual property. We don't touch any of your user information other than their email addresses, so we can show you if an email is compromised.
Hey, Bill, can you just really quickly say, that people have asked, what happens if you get an alert and it's a false alert? Quickly, I mean, presumably you tag it and say this is normal, and then it doesn't find it anymore or anything that's similar, right?
So I'll give you an example that happens quite often. You'll go through a pen test. You're doing pen testing. You've asked Tom's team to come in and do a series of pen tests to check your security. The NDR tool will better pick that up, and this WatchGuard NDR tool will pick that up. And when it does, you can go in and say to it, yeah, this is abnormal, but it's normal, so don't alert on it. If it's normal and WatchGuard thinks it's abnormal, you can tell it, no, for us, this is normal. And that will actually train the AI. That's part of the neural network. You can tell the environment, this isn't a problem, so we don't want you to incorporate it into the models. You can tell the environment, this is a light problem. This isn't a bad problem for us. We want you to reduce what you're looking at here. We can also go in and configure to connect more correlation so we can make it more noisy or less noisy, depending on what your team wants to deal with. The important thing is that it's all risk scored, so it's prioritized. Something really bad is happening. You're going to get a lot of alerts with a lot of big numbers. We're going to make sure you know about it. And then there's going to be things you can go in and do around mitigating risk and stuff that we're not going to throw a lot of alerts out. And you have control over how you want to do that.
Yeah, so let me emphasize a couple of things here. So first of all, our eSecurity Solutions is in the business of helping companies become secure. And regardless of whether your goals are compliance or best practices or ad hoc, we want to be your partner. And the way we do that is to help you assess where your risks are and then define solutions. And then ultimately we can source those products and we can help you manage them. So we can manage this NDR solution for you. You don't have to have extra resources on hand. I'm sure Bill's going to say it's not that hard to do, but the reality is it's, installation. Everybody knows installation is different than management. So
Yes.
if you want to manage it, monitor it, and use it effectively, there's always some effort involved in that. I don't care how good the technology is. Even if it only found things, that were true alerts, you'd still have to do something with that. So, our goal is to provide, like, we provide 24/7 managed security for all kinds of areas like firewalls, MFA, endpoint security, and NDR, as well as SIEM. So these are all things that we can help you with. But if we get on the phone with you, we can help figure out the right way to work together. Our goal is to figure out how we can work together with you to be your partner, and whatever the right way is, we want to map that out and then help you in any area that you need help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Tom's team have been trained, they're certified in this product. A lot of how you use this product is based on the security standards that you set for your organization, what your organization does, how risk averse you are, how aggressive or defensive you are. And there's a lot of variation you can do with this product to tune it to operate really well in your environment. The easy pieces are collecting data, doing the baseline stuff. And the AI, which someone asked, it's about 14 days for the AI to learn normal, for all of the different models to align. The AI does a lot of the work for you. But what you want to do with that control environment, what you want to do with managing your device environment, those things become very much up to you in what works best for your organization. And there's a lot of variability there. The 190 something controls in the product, most of our customers will go through and look at them with their partner and then activate 30, 35, 40 that really apply to them. Very few companies need all of the controls that are in there because they're maybe the wrong vertical, the wrong size. I mean, there's a lot of variation.
Hey, so Bill, we're
Yep.
running over. I don't want to be presumptuous about using people's time. So first of all, there's 22 questions under Q&A, and then there's a bunch of questions under chat. What we're going to do is consolidate those, and we'll make sure Bill and/or eSecurity answers those, and we can respond either directly to you or as a group. We can put that as one document. Probably the best thing to do is make that one document of questions and then answers, and we can circulate that to you, along with the link to the video or shortly thereafter, depending on how long it takes us to answer those questions. So we'll get them all answered. Also, we can spend time on the phone with you to do that. We have senior technical staff here that also can address things for you. We're, like I said, like Bill said, we're trained in it. We're trained in all WatchGuard solutions, and so we can, again, our goal is to be your security partner. So with that, I think we should end this now, and because we've been over an hour, and which I appreciate the fact that everybody's so interested. There's a quick survey afterwards. Please answer that question. That is also a requirement for being in the drawing and so forth. But it's also important for us to get to know you better. So that's really the reason we ask those questions. Thanks very much for joining us today. And we may very well have another one of these in a month or two as the product evolves. But again, this is just second in a series, and we appreciate your attendance today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Tom, thanks for having me.